So from a research perspective, it's always a bit easier to say all of the things that you want to have from policy. I think a good policy to kind of alleviate the burden on most vulnerable households has three main components. So the most important thing is that you have a mix of policy. You don't need one policy that does everything, you need a mix. And by a mix, I mean that we have to think about energy prices, you have to think about household income, and you have to think about energy consumption. That includes efficiency and sufficiency. So those are the three things that really good policy should target, and the focus probably should be on income and on kind of consumption behavior rather than prices most explicitly. And I think the second really important thing is the fact that, which I think everybody would agree on, that policies need to be targeted at most vulnerable households. So you need to be very intentional with policy design. And in doing so, you have to be able to identify and define vulnerable households. That has to happen kind of on a meta level in terms of energy poverty data, for example, but it can also be kind of through more practical terms, thinking in terms of specific policy design. And then in this sense, it's really important to kind of be practical as well about distributing support measures in that way. And I think what makes really good policy design from kind of what we know from the research is also using existing mechanisms. So using social welfare payments on the one hand, and on the other hand, what we know from the research is that we exclude certain groups that are still vulnerable, but that aren't included in the existing kind of social welfare payments, for example, or in the existing support schemes that we have. So it's important to kind of do both, to take the practical route of what we know and target policy in that way, and at the same time identify vulnerable groups that we might not see directly or that we might not be targeting at the moment. And then I think the third thing is, in terms of, again, a mix of policies, to have a mix of time spans in good policy design. So short-term relief measures are incredibly important to make sure vulnerable households are protected from increased poverty as energy prices rise. But we can also do a lot of things in the kind of mid and long term. And in the midterm, we can even think about things like very short-term energy efficiency measures, like replacing windows and doing kind of small things like that. Those things can be incentivized and subsidized. And we can focus really on the long-term measures that improve energy efficiency for the most vulnerable households who often live in the worst performing buildings. And also to move away from this dependency of fossil fuels. That is the really big priority in terms of policy design.